by Pastor Jake and Pastor Nathan. And Jake's going to get us kind of up to speed where we're kind of coming from last week into this week. And Nathan's going to kind of propose our first question for the morning, and we'll hang on for the ride and go from there. So
we're in the midst of this series that we really began 2 weeks ago, and talking about the new day, a new story of the church. That in many ways this coronavirus pandemic and all of the effects of it are helping the church turn a page, and in many ways craft a new story and reinvent and re-understand ourselves. Who are we as the people of God? So last week we spent our time talking about the nature and the heart of the gospel. And really that to understand the gospel, we have to understand who is Jesus. And we developed what we called last week, the term is Christology, our understanding of who Jesus is. And we talked a little bit about the conversation that's been ongoing within Christian subculture about the nature of the gospel, and debated that back and forth a little bit. What is the gospel really about? Is it Jesus is king? Or is it just justification by faith or personal salvation by faith? What is the gospel really at its heart? Is it that as individuals we can experience personal salvation, or is it Jesus has come, he's king, he's come to establish his kingdom, and he is a king who does provide personal salvation, but also does much more than that? And so it was our agreement that the gospel is Jesus is king, and we spent some time talking through why that's really important, and important for us in this season to lay that foundation. So this morning we're going to talk about then the church. This is if the gospel is Jesus as king, and then what is the church? Who are we as the people of God, and what's significant about that identity?
Yeah, so last week, one of the things that we threw out a bunch of theological words, a bunch of ologies. Mm-hmm. And one of those ologies that we threw out was ecclesiology. And that has to do with the sent nature of the church. And specifically, I think you looked up right before we started recording, said that it is ecclesia, and it is the called out nature of the church, mm-hmm. that Christ is calling out to the church. And in that calling out, it's not just a calling out to be saved and eternally rescued with Christ in heaven, but there is then a sending to that calling out. And how critical that is, that we understand that as part of the ecclesiology of the church, and the purpose and necessity of the church, and what the church is here to do. So again, if we just touch on where we were last week, in the nature of what is the thing that is most important, it is the justification by faith, or that Christ is king. If it's justification by faith, then the called nature of the church is just get people saved. Mm-hmm. Get your fire insurance, get your ticket to heaven when it's all said and done. But if the purpose of what God is doing in the world is that Christ is king, and it begins with that, then that changes the called out, the ecclesia of the church. And that's kind of what we want to kind of unpack this morning.
And I think it's easy for us to pick on the American church. I mean, obviously
Sure.
It's the church we're most familiar with, but my guess is that it's probably not too different in many cultures. And again, without being too derogatory, picking anybody, I mean, we look at the European church, sure. in a very precarious place, yes. right now. Mm-hmm. And I think it is because of that, right? That we've, using martial arts terms, right? Like, hey, I got in, I got my white belt. I'm good to go. I'm part of the club. Yeah. And then there's no growth. Mm-hmm. There's no mission. There's no further evangelizing, right? Yeah. Of obviously of the gospel message, or of at least your church. And so, again, I think that's why we've identified this is the first step. Mm-hmm. All right, if we do believe that Christ is king, it's about his kingdom, then there's obviously a citizenry, right? Or there's, he has a people. And so then what is our duty, right? What is our job? We need to be not just called out, that's great, but now there's,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Get a little ahead of ourselves, but the people, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it really is important. Like we said, we start back there with what the nature of the gospel, because, you know, and there are some churches and those that fall on that side of that debate, that it's about personal salvation, right? Those are the churches where everything is rooted around and developed around understanding of getting people saved. The way that they do worship, the kinds of lessons or Bible studies that they craft, the songs that they sing on Sunday, all of those kinds of things are oriented around that mission. Their whole, the missions of the churches, and that really is, and not to pick on anybody, it's just kind of the reality of it, church growth movement kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The general, evangelical church model of doing church, it is built around the idea that the gospel is personal salvation, and that the focus of the church is sharing that news of salvation, basically helping to get people saved. Mm-hmm. If we backpedal from that and say, no, it's about the kingdom, well, then the mission of the church, or we don't want to get too much into mission, but I mean what we do as a church, it is tough to separate.
It is. Yep.
What we do as the church is much broader than that.
Yeah.
And how we do church is built around the proclamation of kingdom, not just salvation.
And really, the order of things, as you were just talking, and it occurred to me, and what you said, it's hard to separate these things. And perhaps this is why the church has been, I hate to say confused, but I think the church has been confused on what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're getting it done. Because it very easily becomes a pluralistic conversation where we now start, we don't finish the conversation about ecclesiology, and we jump right to missiology and mission. Mm-hmm. And we don't finish that conversation, we jump to something else. And so now we have all these little disparate pieces, and now we're looking for something to draw them all back together, but we never finished any of those conversations. Yeah. We never drew conclusions about this is who we are. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't decide who we are before we get to mission, now mission begins to shape who we are. That becomes very dangerous.
Right. That's right. It's important to let our identity, our sense of identity, to speak into, inform, and shape the mission for us. And that's what today is really about, is understanding the identity. I mean,
because if you don't understand who you are, mission changes with the times.
Right.
And then shapes who you are based on what is happening in the culture you're surrounded by.
Yeah, and we become a people, a mission with a people, not a people with a mission.
Yeah.
And I'm understanding, and that's why it's been my conviction for a few years. There's been all this the push in church leadership to develop your mission statement, have your mission, everything funnels to your mission statement, and I kind of pushed back against that personally. Not that it matters what I think and what I do in the grand scheme of things, but for me, I decided I wasn't going to operate out of a mission statement. I was going to lead our church to operate out of an identity statement. Yeah. Who are we?
Yeah.
And let that, because what we do will flow out of who we are.
Yeah.
But if we know who we are, then what we do, like you said, it changes with the times and whatever seems to be. And there again, if we point back, if we're being caught up in church growth stuff that's all about getting the masses saved, then we don't know who we are as a Wesleyan holiness folks. Then then we get wrapped up into all those missions that aren't really our identity.
Yeah.
Well, this is, I think one of Andy Stanley's famous things, right? Whatever your mission statement on the wall, if it's not happening down the hall, as you say, it doesn't matter. And so the same thing, you could have whatever statement you want, but if the people, right, don't know who they are, right, of this, you are a called people, right? You are called out. You do have something. You have the best. I mean, we're back to the gospel message, right? You have the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. This is who you've hopefully submitted your life to. And that is good news, right? And that is something to be shared. And again, that's where is saving people important? Absolutely. But it's one of those things that flows from not that I'm I'm just trying to rescue people. I'm flowing because I'm telling you, I think I found the best thing.
Yeah.
I think I found the truth. I found the way. I found the life. And I want to share that with you.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, then that does then go hand in hand with within what's our mission. And again, and like you said, identifying locally what, like you guys have done, right, with the Hope House, of going, there is a major need in our community.
Right.
And we're meeting this not because our church needs something to do. You go, because these are the people that we are, right? Because we do believe in hope. We do believe in change. And we believe that it's not going to be a quick process.
Right.
Yeah. It's not, and I think you say all the little pieces that with the conversations that we never finish. I think that's so well put. And again, I don't know if it's just unique to our culture, but we love, we're that microwave, instantaneous gratification.
Right. Yep.
Amazon Prime 2-day shipping. Well, it used to be. The same thing. You're like, well, why isn't that person gotten baptized yet? Or why is that person not here at church like they should be? Or why are they not reading? It takes some time.
Yeah.
And and especially if you have somebody that has a lot of baggage, right? Or a lot of, I mean, we all do, right? It's like it's going to take a while to get, it is a process.
Right.
But again, understanding who our King is, understanding who we are, that leads us further down that path.
Being faithful to the process of unearthing the answers to those questions is not easy. Like you said, it takes time, and we're not good at patience. Yeah. Even in the midst of this pandemic, I don't know that I've become a lot better at patience. I've had a lot more practice at it. I don't know that I'm any better at it, though, because patience stinks.
It does.
I don't like being patient. I don't like it at all. I ordered some stuff. Speaking of Amazon, I ordered some stuff, and it's not here yet. I'm kind of irritated about that. If I'm just honest, I'm sorry. If I'm just honest.
Yeah. I didn't realize how much I missed 2-day shipping.
I know. Sorry. I didn't mean to bring that up.
Yeah. So let's
off on a long rant.
Yeah, before we get off into all that, so let's talk about then what is the church? How do we understand ourselves as the church? And there's a lot in the New Testament about that.
Well, and this is
kind of like the whole New Testament, but
that's what. Well, and this is we talked about this too here before we recorded. Is I think this last 2 months, with all of our churches, right, being out of their buildings, being out of, and we sing that. I don't know if you guys. I assume in your tradition too. That I'm not even going to try to sing the song because I'll massacre it.
Come on.
The church, or the people, and the steeple, and and inside's all the people. However that song goes. It's been a long time. All
here's
the people.
The church.
Yeah.
Here's the steeple.
I said I wasn't going to sing it. Okay. But I think it's really tested that, hasn't it? Yeah. To go, well, we say the church is the people, and it's not our building. But the same thing. I mean, I have a lot of people going, man, I just want to get back to church, right? I just want to be back in the sanctuary. I just want to be together with everybody. I just want to, Yep. But again, we're back to, but who are you, right? Who are you in Christ? Yep, you're part of something.
And I want to say that's okay. It's okay to love the church.
Yes.
I mean, it's okay to love the sanctuary, the place where you have encountered God, where He has been faithful to meet with you,
right?
Absolutely.
And to mark, is at that altar where something happened with Him.
Sure.
Place is important.
Yeah, sure.
But it doesn't define who we are at church. It doesn't encompass all, and that's where I think we have probably more than we cared to admit lived as a church.
Yeah.
And I think there was some moving away from that. At least we were talking about it, even if not everybody was thinking it or had really internalized the belief that the church was the people, not the place. Yep. What I think is, at least for me, maybe caught us off guard is how much we believed the church was the gathering, the event, and just how much we have become event-driven in the church, and that we see the scope of the church as what we do on Sunday mornings. And we know that's not really the building, but it's still the gathering in the building, or the people who are gathered in. So now we've been forced to go, wait a second. Are we still the church if we can't gather in the way that we, and what is that? What does that mean?
Well, there's a place, and I can't remember where this is in Isaiah, where Isaiah is told by the Lord to tell the people, And place was really important to the Israelites. When something significant happened, they would build an altar of remembrance, so that when you would pass by that, you could tell your kids, hey, this is where God showed up. This is where something significant happened. And somewhere, and I don't remember where this is in Isaiah, but Isaiah is told by the Lord, tell the people to forget the former things. Forget the things that were before. And forgetting was unthinkable.
Right.
But why does God do that? Because he knows that we have a tendency to place too much importance on the thing rather than the God, rather than him, the shadow, instead of the one who has created it.
That's when we talked about the Exodus, right?
Yeah.
The Exodus was more about getting Egypt out of the people than the people out of Egypt.
Right.
And in Isaiah, the exile is very much the same thing.
Right.
And what does God tell the people of Israel in through the prophet Isaiah? And get married, have a family.
Yeah.
Go to work.
Plant
You're going to
gardens.
be here a while. Plant gardens.
Yeah.
And just that one there. So
I don't like quarantine.
So we Carter wanted to start a garden. So Allison ordered a bunch of seeds online. They were going to start a garden. She loves to have fresh asparagus. Grew up having that every spring, and she thought, okay, we'll plant some of that. So they started with the little, the cups in the living room and the window and all that kind of stuff. And just this week, she read that it takes 3 years for asparagus before you can harvest anything out of it. And she's like, dang, I was really looking forward to some asparagus. And I thought, for one thing, that's why I don't garden. It takes too long. But for another thing, right, just to think about, to garden, to do that, requires a commitment.
Yeah.
It requires some longevity. It requires some permanence. And that's what God tells the people.
Yeah.
Settle in. Go about life. You're going to be here a while. Forget the former things, because if all you're doing is looking back, you're going to miss what's happening here and now.
Right.
And so, I honestly don't remember how we got down that rabbit trail, but permanence.
Right. Yes.
Being willing to invest in the.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's good.
So when we think about
we planted asparagus too, but we knew it was gonna. Whatever.
Next time we'll run our gardening ideas by you.
Well, but I think just to your point, right, where it, whether it's this pandemic, right, or whether it's some other thing that will happen next year, or the year. It's just. This is why I think it's so important that we understand who Christ is. We understand what the gospel is.
Yeah.
We understand who we are. And as we'll explore next week, we'll understand what our mission is. Because when we understand those things, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't matter if it's exile. Right? It doesn't matter if it is some sort of subjugation by another empire. I think that seems unfathomable to us. But, you're like, think about Noah. I'm going to wipe out everybody. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Oh. Wow. I'm going to give you 100 years to build and prepare for it. Jiminy Christmas. The journey he takes Abraham. Just all of those things. You look at anybody in the Bible, right?
Well, and this is important in relation to quarantine and how we think about the church. If our mission is our identifying hinge. Okay, we're all in with Jesus. There's no question about that.
Yep.
But if the mission of what the church is doing is the identifying thing that the whole church kind of hinges on, and something like, I don't know, a global pandemic happens and shuts the world down, your mission is out the window.
Yeah.
Because people can't gather, people can't worship, you can't preach and teach like you used to. What do you do then? If your identity is tied up in what I'm doing, and this is not just a church issue. Mm-hmm. Largely, this is a man issue, because we tend to define ourselves by what we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Women are different, and I don't fully even understand women. Nevertheless, this is a big issue. This is not just a church issue. Now, we're talking about it in the context of church, but it is far, far more reaching than that.
Yeah.
But and to me, this is why I think it's this moment right now where I think we do take that self inventory. Right, what kind of husband am I?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of father am I? What kind of brother, son? I mean, whatever it is, right? And am I doing my due diligence? Right, like you said, it's deeper than or wider than a church, church context. But again, part of that is if I know who I am, right? If I know I'm a child of God, I know that Christ is King. Then there should be love and praise for my wife, right? There should be encouragement for my children. And again, I know none of us are perfect, so no matter what may come, right? That I'm the same person in a pandemic or not a pandemic,
Right?
Yeah.
Or a war or not a war, or a famine and not a famine, right? That I'm still that same person because Christ hasn't changed,
Right.
right? And so my identity in Him hasn't changed. And then, like I said, again, that mission will potentially and probably should change then, depending on what the circumstances
Right.
are. So we had some verses. I think we got.
Well, I wanted to add to that. So when I was in high school, my mom would often just remind me, or just would say as a reminder, don't forget who you are and whose you are. If we were going and doing something, just don't forget that identity. It comes back to knowing who we are. So as a church, think about who we are. One of the passages that we talked about, and so let me just kind of preface it with this: our working understanding of the church is not just the gathered people. It's a gathered people who are oriented around the Word, big W, meaning Jesus, who are called to a place. That those three things, it's a gathering of people who are oriented around the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and who have a specific calling to a specific place. That God cares about the community in which you live and worship, and that place matters. So in thinking about that, this is just one of the passages. This is from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful, wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And so, just a reminder that as the church, right? We are a holy people. We are a chosen people. We have received the mercy of God. We've been called out of darkness into light, and that the language that Peter uses there, it's communal. It's not personal. I mean, we read you, but we know he's talking about the collective whole. You, the people of God, you have been chosen, you have been purchased, you have been made holy. And you go, well, I don't always feel holy. It doesn't matter. You've been made holy. Well, yeah, but sometimes I'm not very holy. You have been made holy. Right. And sometimes it's a matter of learning how to live as God has already made you.
Oh, man.
And so this is this identity as the church. We are collective, the people of God, and called to be His faithful people in a world of brokenness, in a world of. But the identity is that we are a holy people who have received mercy, who've been called out of darkness and into light, and so therefore go.
Yeah. I think one of the other passages we're looking at, I think very similar to that in Ephesians 2, 19 through 22. And this is Paul writing, so I mean we have Peter's writings, now Paul. He says, consequently, you're no longer foreigners and aliens, but you're fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus Himself as the chief cornerstone. And in Him the whole building is joined together and rises up to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in Him you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by His Spirit. And again, just the quick, ancient architect, there was usually a cornerstone that was your perfectly measured, laid out stone that all of the measurements would be cast off of to build your building. And right, this is what he's saying. This is who you are. Christ is that cornerstone, which again, I think we've arrived there by our definition of the gospel, right? He's our foundation. He's the perfection. And from that, right, the teaching of the apostles and the prophets, right? There's this idea, the Old Testament, New Testament. These are the Word, maybe not capital W, and then the Word, which is Christ,
Right.
capital W. That this is what we build ourselves upon, right? This is where we find our identity. This is where, and as I think we'll get to next week too, is where we find our mission.
And that's one of the things too that's really important. And this is going to seem like it goes without saying, but the truth of the matter is, when we really look carefully at how the church often functions, it doesn't. The people of God oriented around the Word, capital W, not oriented around culture, not oriented around politics, not oriented around the hot button issues of the day, not oriented around fads, not fill in the list, right?
Sure.
Right.
Oriented around the Word of God, which makes us implicitly countercultural, right? Which makes us, sometimes when I look at how much the church, it's like the church is the kid on the playground that just wants to fit in, and so whatever the world does, we try and do. Right,
Yeah.
the world invests in that.
I've got a shiny new ball. Come and play with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, technology changed how we do movies, so now we're going to totally change everything. Like Hollywood can do movies better than us. Let's just do, let's be our thing. Just as an example, the church loves to look at what the world is doing and go, well, how do we get on that? How do we play in that ball game? That's not our ball game.
Yep.
And we have to learn to be content with that and go,
Yeah.
we are in the world, not of the world. We are doing our own. We are oriented around the Word, not.
Yep. I say this from stage quite a bit to our folks. I said, I wonder sometimes if the Mennonite and Amish folks have maybe got a better angle on some of the stuff that, and again, right, and it's the tension, right? I think, and I think there is some of that purposely unresolved tension that is just life. And I think we see Jesus navigate that perfectly in the Gospels. But, there are some aspects, and at least from the outside looking in, when you look at Mennonite culture or an Amish, obviously, even further down that side, you're like, right, we just don't engage with that stuff. We just don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I right, and what's the right answer there? Where's the tension there? Because I love sci-fi. I like my phone and electricity and
I was gonna say, if you're gonna start calling me for rides,
that's what
gotta talk.
Oh, editing. It'll be saved in editing, right? So this
We're gonna have some.
yeah, this is gonna be good. So this whole discussion then, I mean, maybe leads to a self-answering question, but right, the question is the church essential? Right? I mean, is that
right?
Is the church important?
Is it necessary?
Is it necessary?
Have we evolved past the need for the church?
Again, as we identified those 4 paths forward, I mean, that was essentially kind of one of the paths, right? We don't need to meet. Let's just forget meeting. We'll just continue to do things online, and maybe if we see each other in passing at the grocery store, I mean, it's an option.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's an option. So is the church essential?
And an understanding is essential to our faith, right? To following a Christian. So one of my following Christ. One of my favorite stories about this, and I don't know how true it is or not, but it's a story of D.L. Moody, who there was some prominent Chicago politician who was a member of his church, who came to the in his mind, enlightened opinion that he didn't need the church. He had moved beyond need for the church. And so Moody, in a desire to pastorally address this, he went to go visit the guy, and the gentleman said, "Look, I know why you're here. You're not going to convince me of anything, but you're welcome to come in and sit down." So D.L. Moody comes in, and they're sitting in the parlor of this house, and the fire is going in the fireplace, and he doesn't really say anything. They just kind of sit there in silence. And D.L. Moody gets up, and he goes to the fireplace, and he grabs the tongs there that hang on the rack on the hearth, and he pulls out one ember, one coal, and he brings it out, and he sets it in the middle of the room on the floor, and he returns the tongs, and then takes his seat and doesn't say a word. And finally, as will happen when the coals are moved from the fire over a period of seconds into minutes, it cools off and to now it's just a little piece of coal or whatever. And the gentleman said, "Now I understand." Right? That to try and remove yourself from the body, and to say that we don't need. And there's the Hebrew writers addresses this, specifically as he's talking. And again, the book of Hebrews is to the Jewish Christians and helping them understand the importance of the superiority of Christ over everything that had come before that, all the faith traditions and things. And there was some people in the early church who were of the opinion that you didn't need the church. You could go without it. And so the Hebrew writer just simply writes and says, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for whom we promise is faithful, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." Right?
And that phrase, "one another," that shows up a ton of times in those letters to the early church, that you pray for one another, you hold one another up, you bear one another's burdens. That is a consistent phrase throughout especially the writings of Paul. As he is encouraging the churches, do not stop getting together. What you're doing matters.
Yep. The church is God's. The church is God's plan for salvation.
Yeah.
Right. It is. There's no plan B. The church is God's chosen way of redeeming the world. He created a people called the church to be His faithful witnesses.
You mean He doesn't have a second wife?
Sorry.
We're Plan A.
We are Plan A.
Plan A.
Right?
Sorry.
And so, and I love in that passage where he talks about encourage one another, spur one another on towards love and good deeds.
Yes.
Right? There is this nature, spurring something requires some confrontation. Sometimes it's a little bit, there's a little bit of rub there, but it's for the good of both. And there is this end to which we're looking, the day, right? And in my Bible, it's capitalized, the day, meaning the day of Christ's return. That this is a thing we're hoping for, and it's something we cling to. And as we look and strive together towards that day, we're never going to get there on our own. I heard a pastor one time say, "You can get to hell all on your own. You need each other to get to heaven."
Yeah, amen. Well, this is, I go back to the martial arts thing. This is, same thing. We've been out of our jiu-jitsu routine for 2 months, not going to the gym, not having any instructor to instruct us, not having any other people to to roll with or to practice. And I'm telling you, the pounds are coming back on. I'm sure I have forgotten probably just about anything that I've learned in our 6 or 7 months. Being, and it is right. You go, this is important. There's a reason that we have class. There's a reason that we have practice, right? There's a reason that we gather together to worship, right? There's a reason that we have small groups. There's a reason that we have home fellowship groups, whatever you call them. But there's a reason that we do these things. And I think for us, I think fair to say, and maybe more than our people, I think it's been good for us to be together and to discuss and to talk and to be in the Word and to get off on gardening tangents or whatever. But it is right. I love it. I love it when you talk about just the incarnational things, right? That there's a reason that Christ came in the flesh. That no matter how awesome the technology is, even if we were to be able to be, fully formed 3D holograms or something, you would.
That's cool. But
that's cool, yeah. But it would still lack the.
Yeah.
Wish they were really here. They were really.
And there's something that you can. See that's so natural about that, the desire to be with people, that the other things don't replace that, right? So, and people keep talking about how at least with this pandemic we have the technology, we have FaceTime, which is a great blessing, and it does make it a lot easier. Right. But I was reminded last weekend of the fact that it just doesn't, as great as it might be, doesn't make up for being together. My parents, who had been quarantined up north at their cabin, finally were able to make it home. On their way downstate, they stopped by to see us. we had not seen them since this thing started, which is the longest we've gone without seeing them since I think we moved back to Michigan 6 years ago. Longest our boys have ever gone without, them stopping by as they would pass through town.
Yeah.
And so as soon as they walked in the house, whatever my boys were doing, they had stopped it. They heard Grandpa's voice, and they ran at him. Now, they'd seen him. We'd had family Zoom meetings, and we'd had all that. But you look at that, and you see, even in these kids, 2 and 5, there's something about being together.
Yeah.
That you just can't replicate through technology, as good as it is, and as much as it helps.
Sure.
You just can't replicate being together.
So this kind of returns us back to where we began in talking about the ecclesiology of the church. That we are a called out people, and being called out, God designs this opportunity for us to gather, then to be together, and how important that is, and how critical that entire process of gathering at the temple. That's something we see in the Old Testament and runs right through the life of Jesus. And there are some serious issues at play with the temple and just the mentality of what happens at the temple that does create some problems. But the temple matters, and then the gathering of God's people. So that called out nature, the ecclesia of God's people, is called out in order to be sent out. We referenced this, I think, last week as Abraham gets his call from God. Says, I'm going to bless you, not so that you can gather people around and say, hey, come experience the blessing, but so that you can then bless others. Yeah. And that is really maybe the turn that we want to make in pointing to next week.
Yeah.
The question being, what should the church look like coming out of the pandemic? And that kind of points us towards mission. As we've established the nature of the church, the why the church matters, and the identity of the church, that then leads us into a discussion about the mission, the missiology of the church. What is it that we are sent to do? Because if we understand that whole ecclesiology, we're called out so that we can be sent out. What is it that we are being sent out into?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of that sending?
So as we think about the that kind of 3-tier definition of church I was talking about, right? Gathered people oriented around the word, called to a place. I think last week was the word, right? Kind of a little bit, and this week is kind of the importance of the gathered people in its many facets. It's not gathered people just on Sunday mornings how we gather, but it is how we do life together and the identity we have as the people of God. I think where we go from here, what does a church look like on the back, and what is our missiology? That place, the placeness of things is what I think needs to come to the forefront. That I think was stirring within us. I know it was stirring within us, right? The only reason that we have done things like I Love My City is because of a growing sense of placeness. But I think taking that to the next level and really making place central to what it is with the church, not ad hoc, is should be a big piece.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that because I think, like you said earlier, of everybody having maybe a little bit of these pieces somewhat figured out, but not fully. This is the one. I think next week the idea of mission, where I think it's maybe the most tangible, right? It's the easiest one to go. Okay. Yeah. So that's when I understand who Christ is, when I understand who I am. That should then be my.
It gives a sense of purpose to why we do what we do. So if we let you said it well before about having a sense of identity, an identity statement. If we understand who we are, we can better understand why we do what we do. But if we don't understand who we are, it's just me asking you to do something that I believe in, that you kind of go, I don't know, I guess that's cool for a little bit.
Right.
I'll come to the one thing that you're doing, but I'm probably not coming again. Because I'm not where you are. But if we start with a sense of identity and understanding why it is that we are doing what we're doing, that gives voice and longevity to the church.
I can't prove this, but as you're talking about it, I am thinking that one of the struggles that, of course, that not unique to us, that we have as church leaders, is getting people to buy in, right?
Sure.
Getting people to do something, whether it's a new Bible study or a new ministry, something, is always one of the endless battles as church leaders. That maybe the rub there is just that. They don't know who they are. And for a while, in the church, we really didn't do a great job of telling them and equipping them. That this is who we are, and therefore this is what we... Because, like you just said, if we know who we are, then you're not just asking me to do something or add one more thing to my schedule. There is an intrinsic understanding of why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it's who I am.
Right.
That's how we function. What do you do at a major sporting event at the very beginning? You sing the national anthem and you stand and men remove their caps and whatever. Why? Because that's what you do as an American citizen. That's part of the...
In that place.
Nobody's going, well, geez, they're making me stand up for this song again. That's not the heart behind it, right?
Yeah.
So in the church, have we not helped people understand this is who you are, and because pouring out of who you are, this is what you do.
Now, this is probably a rabbit trail that we don't have anywhere near the time to go down, but I just thought of this as you were saying that, understanding who you are and what is the church's responsibility in this. We were just talking in our short break about the broken understanding of who you are and the damage that has come into all of our lives, because all of us, because we're human and we rub shoulders with other humans, well, we used to, and humans are dysfunctional by nature. We are broken people, and broken people. The old cliche, and I don't like that. I think this trivializes theology and stuff. But broken people break people.
Yeah.
And there's no getting around that. I might not like the quippiness of that, but it's a truth. Broken people break other people. And so how does the church respond to that? Again, we can't do this now. But how does the church respond to that issue, that very real problematic issue of broken people coming in, not knowing who they are, and the church trying to, at different times in history, either answer it in quick, pithy ways that don't really get to who we are, or answer it in ways that don't actually help. Okay, well, you're broken. Well, come on down here to the kids' wing, and we'll put you to work in here. And whoa, too fast, too much, doesn't address what's really going on. Again, that's probably another conversation for another day. But
again, I think, that's why it's important to have that strong sense of who we are as Christians, as the church. I mean, it's like just with the homeless shelter, right? You know, I know I'm ashamed to say the very few times I've volunteered, but to me, I'm here to serve you, right? I'm here to serve you, and I'm here, why? Because this is what I do as a Christian.
Right.
Yeah. This is what I'm, and I think for a lot of people, there's that fear of like, well, I don't know if I want to become a Christian because then I might have to go to Africa and be a missionary. And you're like, you don't even want to go down to the homeless shelter and volunteer. Why are you worried about Africa? And so, but there's a responsibility. Of course, the king is going to ask you to do something.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a free ride you get. You've been bought at a high cost.
Yeah.
Of course there's duty and responsibility and again, it's service. You're serving, and that's I'm looking forward to next week's discussion. That'll be good. So is that
so until then.
So until then. All right. Again, may the peace of the Lord be with you and your family. Hope that you're hanging in there, and Lord willing, maybe at the end of May but keep praying for those that are sick, and keep praying for those that obviously have lost loved ones during this time. Again, part of what we are, who we are, to support and encourage those that are hurting and in need. So, God bless you all. Have a great day.